On this episode of the show, we have a conversation about a virtual school here in East Baton Rouge Parish. What about this new arena that's coming to LSU? We'll have a conversation about that. And the Dean of the Senate joins us to talk about the legislature and his run for House District 6. Roll it, Kirk. So this week up in the podcast studio, beginning this episode with the Dean of the Louisiana Senate, State Senator Cleo Fields, former state representative, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Might be circling back on that, and we'll get to that in the next segment. I want to begin, first of all, Senator, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to begin with where we are right now. We're in the midst of a legislative session. The regular session's going on right now. How do you think things are going?
Well, I think they're going, it's the second week of the session. I think it's going fine. There are a lot of bills that have been filed this session of the legislature. There's a lot of talk about having a constitutional convention. And there's a lot of talk about rushing this session so that we can get into a constitutional convention. So it's a lot going on in a short period of time.
In your mind, what should Louisiana's priorities be right now? Because we have so many things happening. What should be the priority?
Obviously education. And when people hear me talk, they say, will you please stop talking about education? But we have to, because look, I think that's the root of all problems. If we can solve our educational nightmare or problem, we can solve a lot of other problems in our state, like crime, economic development. And I just think we got to invest in kids early. Early childhood education is the way to go. If a state wants to be successful, they have to invest in its children.
It's interesting to me because we've been talking about that for so long, and we've had session after session, and there's never, ever an addressing of it. And you're right. If you fix that issue, you create more employable, productive citizens across our state, which has an impact on quality of life, crime, all those things.
That's right.
Why is it so hard?
Well, last year we took, the year before last, we made kindergarten mandatory. Last year we put over $50 million in the early childhood education, additional $50 million. And so those were steps in the right direction. We got to get them from the womb, to 4 years, to 5 years old. When we give them that impact, that surge of formal learning, they do well in life. And when you look at our penal institutions, the people who are in penal institutions for the most part are not high school graduates. They're dropouts. Right. And so we got to get kids in the early childhood education.
Well, you know this, Senator. People use the data that reflects a child's reading level at third grade to determine whether or not we need more prisons.
That's right.
And the logic is, and I said this to somebody just yesterday, the logic is, well, why don't we invest so that fewer kids are below reading level right now? I think it's a less expensive investment to do that than it is to handle them on the other end when they're disruptive.
When we don't invest on the front side of life, we spend millions upon millions of dollars on the back side of life. So we're going to spend the money. The question is when we spend it. Right. And unfortunately, the attitude in this country is let's spend it on the backside. Right. And let's hold up on the front side. Right. We got to invest early in our children.
1,000%.
When we do, they are less likely to commit crimes. People say, just say no. Back in the day, that was a big slogan that says, just say no to drugs. We have to give kids something to say yes to early. Give them something to say yes to early on in life. And they have less of a chance in being a child. The Bible says, bring up a child a certain way. And that's what we need to do in our state. We need to bring them up a certain way.
There's so many people talking about crime and so many discussions about how bad it is. But I don't think they understand it is bad.
It is real bad.
But what you just talked about, that investment has an impact on crime.
No question about it. No question. See, because kids are not born criminals.
Right.
Let's be clear.
Right.
Babies are babies, and it's how we develop them is how they end up turning out. So at the end of the day, nobody wants to be a part of something that they're not good at.
Right.
So when they get to the 3rd grade and they can't read, they don't want to go to school anymore.
Right.
They're depressed. So
Right.
they want to be a menace to the school.
Right.
I don't want to do that. And we gotta start early. From the time they're born, we gotta put them in that formal educational setting, and we gotta just help them and help them.
We're going to come back and have another segment with Senator Fields and talk about his speech at the press club in just a moment. Stay right there.
It's the best of both worlds. Baton Rouge's best selection of premium cigars and an unparalleled cigar lounge experience. Located in Town Center, it's Don Juan Cigar Company and Don Juan Cigar Bar. Walk into our amazing humidor at Don Juan Cigar Company, then walk next door and experience the plush atmosphere of Don Juan Cigar Bar. Come see why we are Baton Rouge's cigar and good time authority. Don Juan Cigar Company and Don Juan Cigar Bar.
Back with State Senator Cleo Fields, who spoke at the press club earlier this week, and it was fascinating to hear you talk. You're always a great speaker anyway, but what people came to hear you talk about was your run for the U.S. House, which you have announced your candidacy. First of all, why do you want to go back to Washington?
Well, why not? I want to go back because I want to finish what I started. Mm-hmm. We started some great things as a member of Congress. 27, well, we stopped 27 years ago. We started 30 years ago. And, it's a time to go to Congress and get some things done. There's too much partisanship. When I was there, 30 years ago, we didn't have as much. Obviously, there was a Democratic side, a Republican side. But at the end of the debate, they got to know each other.
Right.
They went, they sat down, they had dinner, they talked
That's
to
all
each
gone
other.
now, man.
And that's not happening at all anymore. And I just think that, we cannot move forward unless we build coalitions in the country. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons why I want to go back to Congress. It's a challenging time.
Yeah.
It's not an easy time.
No, it's overly divisive right now. Congressman Graves said that he feels he was targeted. And he made those comments actually on the show a couple of weeks ago. Because he backed Wags, Stephen Waguespack, for governor. He feels like Governor Landry is retaliating against him because of that, and that you're the recipient or the beneficiary of this action. What's your response? You did respond to that at press club, but for people who didn't see it, what about that?
If you want to view me as a beneficiary, I'm a beneficiary of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, not some political squabble. Look, I understand how Representative Graves feel. He's in the same situation I was in 27 years ago. I'd served in Congress, and then 2 years later, they changed the district, and then 2 years later, they did away with the district. So I served 4 years, and the state legislature decided that, hey, we are not going to have this minority district. Look, I feel his pain. I remember like it was yesterday when the legislature voted not to have the second minority black district, and I remember talking to my mentor at the time, General Colin Powell. Yeah. And Colin Powell told me to go home and and don't stay here in Washington. Just go home and make a living. But at the end of the day, look, the courts have decided that Louisiana has gone long enough without giving an African American an opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice.
Well, and so people understand the population of the state is a third African American, so the representation in Congress should reflect the reality in the population. That isn't politics. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes facts get caught up in debate, in arguments, right?
Look, at the end of the day, Louisiana elected its first African American to Congress in 1868. John Willis Menard, first person ever elected, first black person ever elected to Congress in the history of Louisiana. And when he went to take his seat, James Garfield took the floor and said it was too early for a Negro to be seated in this body, and they sent him back. So we never had representation, although we elected an African American to Congress. And then Charles Nash, and then Louisiana went 114 years. And since Reconstruction, there's been only 4 African Americans to ever serve in the state of to represent the state of Louisiana in Congress. And we
you being one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, man, at the end of the day, I understand his pain. But at the end, this has to be fair. You know, we cannot send a part of the population to Washington to represent the state. You know, the whole state should be represented in Washington, D.C. But I understand his pain. Look, I've been through that, been there, done that. It's a tough time, you know, to have your seat, the seat that you represent, taken. But at the end of the day, you know, African Americans in this state should have something to do with who they send to Congress.
What would be, and I got a minute left. What would be your priority? You talked about getting things done. Now, give me a couple of things that you would do if elected back in Washington.
Like education. I mean, we need to invest in early childhood education. That's the pillar of the country. Secondly, some people disagree with me, but I think we need to raise the minimum wage. You know, I think people work too hard, and at the end of the day, they're still poor. And I think that's one of the ways we take people, you know, off of the welfare rolls, pay them for the work they do. Yeah. You know, we got to work on environmental issues. You know, it's a host of issues we have to work on as a member of Congress, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I see you.
Yeah, Tom. So quickly, let me ask you this. I would like, in a couple weeks before the session wraps up and we get in the Constitutional Convention, I want to talk about what a Constitutional Convention means. Will you come back?
Yes, I will. Right. I'll be happy to.
All right, State Senator Cleo Fields back in just a moment. You got
to promise me that he's not going to be doing that.
All right, Chuck.